Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to get into the NBA draft. I'll give you two prospects on my board the Wolves could look at drafting at number 17. We'll talk about an overall Wolves draft strategy. What should they try and do with two valuable picks in this year's draft? It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic time watching Game 5 of the Finals on Monday night. Today on the show, we're going to get into the NBA draft. We'll call it a preview, but really I'm going to be doing a couple of prospects every show. It'll culminate in an actual big board early next week, but I want to get somewhere between 12 and 17 prospects or so out there that I think the Wolves could go and target. I'm going to go, I guess no real order for the time being. A couple guys I like today as guards and wings, guard/wings. Well, one's more of a guard, one's more of a wing, that I think the Wolves could look at drafting at number 17. They're guys that have a pretty wide span on mock drafts. So I want to start there. Actually, the very first thing I want to do is talk a bit about strategy and what I think the Wolves could try and do positionally. What are they looking to do at number 17, especially, but more broadly, I guess, at 31 as well. What's the philosophy going into this? And then we'll spend the majority of the show on a couple of names. We'll talk about Nique Clifford from Colorado State, and we're also going to talk we'll also talk about Jase Richardson from Michigan State, and I'll kind of give my take on both of those guys and whether or not the Wolves should consider taking them at number 17 in this draft. So a lot to get to today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So overall Timberwolves draft strategy. Number 17, of course, which is originally the Pistons pick. They received it in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade last year with the Knicks. And it, of course, conveyed because the Pistons made the playoffs, which I don't think many people were expecting this season. And it's funny because, like, the Wolves were in the same spot last year. They went to the conference finals. There's kind of this, like, hey, they traded all their picks for Rudy, and then, like, they don't have any picks. Well, guess what? They had ended up with 2 first-round picks last year because they also traded a future pick to get the Dillingham pick. And now they have a first-round pick and the first pick of the second round this year. So we talk about a team where there's kind of this, I think nationally, if you polled 100 random NBA fans, I don't know that you'd find more than 10 that realize the Wolves total over the last 2 years will have 4 picks in the top 31 of the last 2 drafts. And last year they traded into the top 10 to draft Rob Dillingham. So we don't know what Tim Conley is going to do. I didn't think they would have a very busy offseason last year. They traded up to get they traded into the top 10 to get Dillingham. Then, of course, the Karl-Anthony Towns, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo trade in at the end of the offseason last year. Is it possible Tim Conley, trades up again this year? It's unlikely. Is it possible he trades out? Yeah. Is it possible they trade for Kevin Durant in the next few days? Yes. Is it possible there's a sign and trade that somehow involves either drafting for someone else or trading the pick? Yeah. I mean, Nasri could be signed and traded. He could be extended. Julius Randle, like, there's all sorts of different possibilities. And what's the Wolves' actual philosophy coming into this draft? Like, are you drafting for need at 17, or are you drafting for current positional need based on what you think the offseason will play out like? Like, some of the guys we'll talk about or the 2 guys we'll talk about today, if you think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is as good as gone, maybe you draft somebody to fill that role. Last year, it was getting to the top 10 to get Rob Dillingham to hopefully give you some scoring punch from the backcourt off the bench. That didn't work out this year. But the other goal was we need a Mike Conley replacement. And that's still the case, right? Conley's got 1 year left on the deal. Clearly is not carrying any sort of a scoring load, and it's taking another step back defensively. So yeah, you need some more backcourt scoring. You need a succession plan for Mike Conley. That was the move for Dillingham last year. Are they still on the hunt for something similar if they don't like what they have in Dillingham? And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit once we get to Jase Richardson. Or are you drafting for help on the wing or to fill in a Nique role? Or if you think Nas and or Randle are gone, or if you think you're going to trade Rudy Gobert in a Kevin Durant deal or whatever, maybe you need more bigs. But like, are you drafting for what you think the offseason will play out? Or are you drafting based on your current roster, your current top 8 or 9 guys, and who could help us the most next year? It's a fascinating question because once you get past the top 8, I mean, we talked about this the other day, but what else is this roster? It's all young guys who couldn't crack the rotation this year. TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham, of course, this year's rookies. Jalen Clark, who was drafted the year prior but didn't play until this year at all because of the injury. Leonard Miller from a couple of years ago now, and Josh Minott as well. That's 5 guys who essentially, take Joe Ingles, who's of course not going to be on the roster anymore, but like take the top 8. Your next 5 guys, like spots 9 through 13, are all somewhere between rookies and third-year guys who have yet to crack a rotation at the NBA level and have only been on the Wolves roster. So do you add 2 more guys to that stable of young guys who can't crack the rotation, or are you adding 1 and you're trading the other pick? I'm on record on the show a couple of times now saying I think that's what they do. I think the Wolves will make one selection at either 17 or 31 and kick the other one forward and try and get a future first-round pick to try and extend, have at least one pick in more years, high pick in multiple years. They've got some future seconds they could trade, so maybe it's 31 and a future second for a lottery protected first round pick and whatever that looks like. I think that's entirely possible. So are you drafting for right now based on how the roster is currently constructed, or are you drafting for what you anticipate your needs will be this offseason, or what you anticipate they'll be in a couple of years? Because, hey, Julius Randle might be back next year, but we don't think we'll extend him. Rudy could be traded next summer. We need a big, and he's not going to play this year. He may not even play next year, but we might need him next year. Like we just need a big like that. That's a possibility. Or if you don't like what you have in Rob Dillingham and you're already convinced like, hey, he's going to get moved. Maybe it's in a Durant trade with Rudy Gobert, or maybe it's, we just don't, we'll trade him at some point. He's still got trade value as a number 8 pick last year, but we don't, now that we've had him in our gym for a year, we don't think he's the answer. We're going to draft a Jase Richardson, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. So I think it's fascinating looking at the different possibilities for Minnesota. I want to start today with a guy that I really like and definitely falls in the category of drafting for need now, a plug and play theoretically guy, and that's Nique Clifford. Nique Clifford plays at Colorado State, of course. Colorado State's head coach, who coached him, who coached Clifford at Colorado State. Clifford played the first 3 years at Colorado and then transferred to Colorado State. Played the last 2 seasons there. He played for Niko Medved, the new University of Minnesota Gophers head coach. And at Colorado, Nique Clifford never averaged more than 6 points per game. He was a rotation, a bench guy off the bench for them. He goes to Colorado State, averages 12 points per game in his 4th season. And then last year, he averaged almost 19 points per game and shot over the last 2 years at Colorado State, shot 37% from 3. He's a wing. He's big. He's 6'6". 6'6" with a 6'8" wingspan. He's already 23 because he's a 5-year college player. So that's why I say he could be a plug and play guy. He could immediately be a role player at the NBA level. What I like the most about him is his size. First of all, he's a good size. He's 6'6". I think he plays a little bit bigger. The wingspan 6'8". And I think he's got a high floor because of his size, because of the fact that he's well-rounded. I think he does basically everything pretty well and doesn't do anything really all that great. I think size is like the one thing based on the position, but he does everything kind of well. Like he can score on the ball a little bit. He's a really good secondary playmaker, which is my favorite thing about him. As a ball screen ball handler, he was 91st percentile in Division I NCAA men's basketball last year. Averaged about 1.1 points per possession as the ball handler off of ball screens. And he's not a point guard, obviously, but he's a wing that can create for himself and for others. His assist rate was I think it was 24% last year. It was well north of 20%, which is outstanding for a 6'6" wing who is not a point guard. As a secondary playmaker, he can be really effective. And, given his age and the fact that he doesn't do anything outstanding, I think the ceiling is relatively low, but the floor is very high. I'll talk about a couple more aspects of Clifford's game and why I think he could be an intriguing pick and maybe tip the Wolves' hand a little bit on their offseason, potentially, if they were to pick him at 17. We'll do all that here next. And then in just a little bit, we'll talk about Jase Richardson from Michigan State. All that's upcoming. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NBA Finals are in full swing. We're just a game away from finding out who the champion is. Every night of the finals delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or breakout player, J-Dub last night, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. We've still got at least one game left in the finals. Which players are going to show up biggest in Game 6 back in Indiana? Maybe you just want to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action's unfolding. Can the Pacers force a Game 7? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to get involved. Sign up right now. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, so Nique Clifford. A couple more things on Nique. I like that he's a big secondary ball handler. I like that he's really good in transition, and I like the high floor. He's a solid defender. He's not outstanding. He's a modest athlete, but again, a solid athlete. I think he's good enough there. And we'll talk about the shooting. Well, might as well talk about the shooting now too. I think he's also an above average catch and shoot guy. Over the course of his career, 5 years in college, he was 39% catch and shoot, but he was over 40% each of the last 2 years in Colorado, when overall he was around 38%. So the shooting is definitely going to play, even if he's not a sharpshooter. Again, not awesome at anything, but really good at basically everything. He averaged 1.2, a little over 1.2 points per possession on catch and shoot attempts, which was 76th percentile. He's also really good in isolation, 95th percentile in college, over 1.2 points per possession there too. We talked about the pick and roll ball handling already, 1.1 points per possession, and he's good at the rim too. Decent spot up shooter, not a great spot up shooter. We talked about the catch and shoot over his career, 39%, a little over 40% this year, 41% this year. And he's great in transition. Again, good, not great athleticism, good, not great at almost everything. And I think if the Wolves were to take Nique Clifford at number 17, it could tip their hand a little bit as to what they think is going to happen with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Not the same player. He's thicker. He's got more strength than Nickeil. Nickeil's a better athlete, certainly, and absolutely a better defender. So don't get this twisted. I'm not saying he's a plug and play Nickeil replacement and you let Alexander Walker, like, that's not what I'm saying. Nickeil's also certainly at this point a more proven shooter, although he wasn't very good his first couple years in the NBA. I think Clifford can do a pretty good, like, I think he would fill the Nickeil role. Even if he doesn't look like Nickeil, he isn't the athlete or the shooter that Nickeil is. I think he's probably a better passer than Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Alexander-Walker was the Wolves' backup point guard last year. I think overall, Nique Clifford could be a better secondary playmaker. I think he could be better in isolation. I think the strength could help him at the NBA level. He's got to work on like, his mechanics are pretty good on a shot. It's not a very quick release, which is something Nickeil's gotten much better at as well. So, like, again, it's not like he's not a facsimile even of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I just think secondary playmaking wing who could do a little bit of everything, who can initiate a little bit of offense and be a solid defender and solid catch and shoot guy could approximate the Nickeil Alexander-Walker role. And also the fact that he can create his own shot if he needs to. Alexander-Walker was miscast in that role early in his career as more of a higher usage on-ball guard. And now he only kind of does it if he needs to. And sometimes he does as a primary ball handler for the Wolves off the bench, which I think he's also miscast in that role a little bit. I think Nique Clifford has the upside to do those sorts of things as what Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been asked to do. I think him being well-rounded is a really important thing for a plug-and-play 23-year-old if he's going to be a first-round draft prospect. I also, the basketball IQ, the intelligence level. I mean, there's film breakdowns on YouTube of him breaking his own stuff down. He worked well as a role player at Colorado, and then as a featured guy at Colorado State, still worked within kind of the framework of what Medved was trying to do there at Colorado State with the Rams. And again, I think he checks all of those boxes. Very impressive, in my opinion, as a well-rounded plug-and-play, can do everything well, even if there's nothing fantastic type prospect. And I think as Nique's insurance, now there is some similar, like he's a different player than Terrence Shannon, but similar size, similar role type, but a different way to kind of to fill that role. TJ Shannon's going to be more of a downhill scorer in the open floor, catch and shoot three guy, but plays a similar position. I think TJ Shannon's also a better defender than Nique Clifford. But that's a guy that Clifford would be fighting for playing time with. And again, it comes back to philosophy. And I want to make sure I make this point as well. I'm not saying Nique Clifford's number one on my board. He happens to be the first guy that I'm ranking because he's somebody that's been in a lot of mocks to Minnesota. And I like him as he's on my board for sure. I don't know where he's going to land on my board when it's all said and done, but I wanted to start there because I do think Nique Clifford is an intriguing fit for Minnesota, and for a team that's been to consecutive conference finals. I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to draft another 19-year-old, another Leonard Miller, another Josh Minot, if they're not going to get the opportunity to play. Now, part of this is like they are going to need to hit on some of these picks eventually. Like if they keep turning in their capital and kicking the can of like actually playing a young guy and drafting a Dillingham last year, not playing him, and drafting a Shannon and not really playing him. Eventually they're going to need to rely on, they don't have cap space. They're going to need to hit on some of these picks, like what Tim Conley was in Denver. He did with Monte Morris, right? Like he became essentially a sixth man and then eventually a starting point guard for that team. Bones Highland at one point was a similar situation for that team. Like you're going to need to hit on some of these picks because of the cap space, because of the limited future assets. And Nique Clifford, while the ceiling is relatively low, I don't know that he becomes anything more than a solid starter as a best case scenario. I think the floor is almost plug and play as a fringe rotation guy immediately. And at 17 for a team that's been to consecutive conference finals, it's not a bad idea. Like he's not a bad, and there's also the chance this doesn't seem to happen all that much, or it hasn't happened as much recently. But could there be a team that's in the like mid-20s that really likes somebody who's still there at 17 and the Wolves trade back and maybe Nique Clifford's still there in the 20s? I mean, that's a possibility too. But I like him as a potential fit for Minnesota and would be pretty psyched if they were able to get him. All right, let's transition to talking about Jase Richardson, a different prospect, a different position, much younger. Jase Richardson is a guard. He's only 6'1". He was listed on some sites. He's listed as 6'3", but without shoes, he was like barely over 6 feet at the combine. I think he's 6'1" with shoes, a little over 6'1" with shoes, 6'6" wingspan, which is important. He is a true combo guard for Michigan State. He is not a point guard, but he's only 6'1". He's also only 19 and a half years old, which actually not that young considering he only played 1 year in college, but a lot of development to be had there. And he is the son of Jase Richardson, of course, the former NBA star is probably not the right way to describe Jase Richardson. I don't think he made an all-star team. He did win a dunk contest, but anyway, the son of Jase Richardson had a really nice year at Michigan State. And I think he's an intriguing prospect as a scorer. In fact, like looking at him as a prospect right now, watching his film, there's a lot of similarities to Rob Dillingham. And he's a little bit bigger, certainly wider, certainly thicker, stronger, not in a bad way. Like he's more built than Rob Dillingham. Remember, Dillingham was like reportedly under 160 pounds when he was working out for the draft last year. Added a little bit of weight and then a little bit of muscle during the season, certainly when he was in the Timberwolves weight room on an NBA strength and conditioning program, which is definitely a positive thing. But Jase Richardson's a little bit more built out, but he's a one and done, just like Rob Dillingham. He's a great shooter, a fantastic catch and shoot shooter, really good off the dribble, good in pick and roll, good at finishing, good on the ball, off the ball, good feel. Like there's a lot of similarities to Rob Dillingham. And I want to get a little bit kind of more in depth on a couple of these points, but I could not shake the feeling as I was watching him that if you draft him, like the only reason for the Wolves to draft Jase Richardson is if they truly don't think that Rob Dillingham is an answer. And after a year of having him in their facility, the Timberwolves are like, nah, Rob's not it. Like Rob ain't it. He's not going to have a role now or in the near future. We're trading him. Otherwise, there's so much crossover between these two guys that I don't think it makes a lot of sense to draft Jase Richardson. Is Jase like, and again, we'll talk about some of the shooting numbers. We'll talk about some of the other, kind of boxes he checks that are very similar to the boxes Rob Dillingham checks. But that's the thing I kept coming back to is like, what's better or even different about Jase Richardson than Rob Dillingham? So we'll get a bit into a bit more detail on Richardson. We'll do all that here next, and then we'll close out the show. All right, Jase Richardson for Michigan State. Last year, and in his only year with the Spartans, he was a 41.2% three-point shooter. He only averaged a little more than 3 attempts per game. The catch and shoot numbers for him as well, though, were really nice. 50 by really nice. That's an undersell. Actually, very similar to Rob Dillingham's last year. Jase Richardson was almost 52% on catch and shoot threes last season at Michigan State. And Rob Dillingham's number was almost exactly the same. I'm going to see if I still have it here. Yeah. Rob Dillingham was 48% on catch and shoot threes last year on 88 attempts. I think Richardson's were slightly lower catch and shoot, but he was 52%. Dillingham last season was a little over 40% overall from three, and same deal here with Richardson, 41% from 3-point range. And what I think was most impressive is not only is he a great off the dribble and catch and shoot guy, obviously catch and shoot is incredible, 52%, but Richardson is awesome at attacking closeouts. And that makes him pretty close to unguardable, especially at the collegiate level, because you have to respect the 3-point shooting, especially catch and shoot from the corner, whatever. He's going to hit ridiculous numbers from there. You close out too hard on him, you close out recklessly on him, and he a couple dribbles and he's past you. He's not a fantastic athlete. I think he's certainly an above average athlete. You'd like generally an undersized guard to be a better athlete than what he is, but he makes up for that with his fantastic finishing through contact and outstanding body control. And maybe the most impressive thing in watching Jase Richardson clips was his body control and how he can feel the contact, lean into it, and still finish. He's a lefty, very clearly a dominant left-handed player, doesn't do a whole lot with his right hand, and that's going to be an issue scouting report-wise at the NBA level. Guys are going to be all over that. But he knows how to feel the contact and finish, and he knows how to control his body in the air and get a shot off as he's being fouled, which continuation at the NBA level, you're going to get more of that than you do in college too. And I think he'll be a guy who gets a lot of and ones in the NBA because of that body control and decent strength for his size, good enough athleticism, and really good overall feel, pretty good touch. The floater percentage wasn't great, but I think he was like 30-something% on floaters, but it was limited volume. And I think overall, the touch in the paint, again, the body control is very good. He was an 84% free throw shooter. We talked about 41% from three. Like, I think the floater game comes for him. And I just think the overall feel, the balance, the body control is the most impressive thing about Jase Richardson outside of the catch and shoot 3-point percentage. So as an offensive weapon, the only thing he doesn't really have is the size. 6'1" with a 6'6" wingspan. I think the handle's good. It's not great. And that could be an issue too, being undersized as a modest athlete, we'll call him. He's better than modest, a slightly above average athlete. You'd like him to have a little bit of a better handle. Like, that's an area Rob Dillingham's got an incredible handle. He's a little loose with the ball, some turnover issues, of course, in limited time at the NBA level, but the actual handle is very good, better than Richardson's coming out of college. So the Dillingham handle, I would say the Dillingham craftiness off the dribble and getting to a spot, pull-up shooting is a little bit better for Dillingham, and Dillingham's a better overall athlete. But again, he's smaller wingspan, more sleight of frame. So there's definite pros and cons if we're comparing these guys, next to each other, for sure. I would say Richardson's probably a better defender than Dillingham. Dillingham, I think, got a little bit of a bad rap coming out of college last year, but it was more because of his size than anything else. I think Richardson actually isn't all that much better at like getting through screens. I think that could be an issue. That's an important thing for Minnesota's defensive scheme, is being able to fight through screens. But I think he's going to be able to hold his own against most point guards at the NBA level. And he's another guy, we talked about this with Clifford, the overall basketball IQ appears to be very high for Jase Richardson. He's rarely out of position. You know that's a thing at Michigan State. Like, Tom Izzo's not going to play you if you don't know what you're doing, especially defensively. And Jase Richardson played a lot as a freshman, and he gave effort, was in the right place at the right time. Again, ball screens were, to me, seemed to be the biggest issue. And then on the offensive end, the one issue would be outside of the size and some of the stuff we already hit on would be he's not great at being a playmaker for others. Again, he's not a point guard. And I would actually say that, like, given their roles, like Nique Clifford, his secondary playmaking ability, his assist rate is more impressive than what Jase Richardson did at Michigan State, because Jase Richardson was supposed to be able to initiate offense, and he only had a 14% assist rate. Nique Clifford at Colorado State was a wing, and obviously a lot flowed through him because he's the best player on the team, but he had almost a 27% assist rate last season. Go back a year prior to that, before he was a true star, and it was still a 19% assist rate. Go back even further at Colorado when he wasn't scoring, and Nique Clifford was over 12% assist rate. You go last year, Jase Richardson only 14.5% at Michigan State. So I worry a little bit about that, and also the lack of I don't think he's quite dynamic enough for the size. And we could talk about the athleticism, the overall dynamism, if you will, isn't quite there for Jase Richardson. So I like him as a prospect. And if the Wolves had not drafted Rob Dillingham last year and he wasn't on the roster, I'd be like, all right, Jase Richardson at 17, I like it. Dude can catch and shoot from three. Like, I would say all the same stuff I said about Dillingham last year, which is plug and play as a catch and shoot guy, plug and play as a spark plug off the bench. Can he be Lou Williams? Can he be, I don't know that he's even as dynamic. Again, Rob Dillingham and Lou Williams, and there's the Jamal Crawford comp. Like, I like those comps for Dillingham. The Jace Richardson comps are, I think, more, like Mike Conley feels too on the nose because he's a lefty guard on the Wolves, but like there's some similarities there. I think I'd be surprised if he was as good a defender as Mike Conley was early in his career. And I think he might actually be a better scorer. I know Conley at one point was a good scorer. I think, like, in terms of off the dribble, getting into the paint, like, I think that Richardson may be a little better there. I didn't put together any additional comps, but that's not a bad one. I think that's pretty close. And so I think the Wolves could like him. I just think if you draft him, what are you doing with multiple 6'1", 19, 20-year-olds that aren't in the rotation? So that would tell me that either Dillingham and or Conley are out right away. And are you going to trade Conley and have Dillingham and Jase Richardson in your backcourt? I just would be surprised if Minnesota did this unless they had something else put together, lined up, knowing that the backcourt was going to shift dramatically here in the coming weeks. So he's on my board. I like him. I think if we wake up tomorrow and Rob Dillingham's no longer on the roster, then yeah, draft Jase Richardson. I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's going to be a starting point guard in this league. I think he's got the ceiling of an all-star. Maybe his ceiling is a Mike Conley type where, he's a one-time all-star, multiple I don't know that he's an all-defensive team guy, but a 40% three-point shooter. I could be talked into that as a Jase Richardson ceiling. And again, it's higher than Nique Clifford ceiling. But do either one of these guys help the 2025-2026 Timberwolves? I think Nique Clifford's got a better shot at that. I think Jase Richardson's more than a bit redundant with what they already have in Rob Dillingham. So anyway, those two guys, I'm not saying where they are on my big board yet. I'm going to formulate a big board over the course of the next few days. We'll talk about it on probably Tuesday's show next week, leading into the draft, the first round next Wednesday. So a lot to still cover, a lot of guys I want to get to. We'll talk about some of the bigs we'll often see mocked to Minnesota. So we'll get into, Asa Newell and Danny Wolf, guys who I've mentioned on the show before that keep getting mocked to the Wolves. I have opinions on those guys, as well as some others, bigs and more guards and wings. We're going to build out a 12, 14 plus guy big board that we'll talk about here on the show. So stay tuned to that. Of course, any Kevin Durant trade news, we'll talk about that as well over the next few days as get ready to put a bow on the finals and move fully into the draft and the offseason mode here at Locked On Wolves. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On NBA Big Board show. Also, The 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft is available now, a 5-episode series with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts to college experts and NBA draft experts, including our very own Rafael Barlow. Find the 2025 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. And yes, I drafted one of the guys I talked about today in the NBA Mock Draft. So go check that out on Locked On NBA. On YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, this show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.